Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of the Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Southwest Virginia fishing report with Matt Reilly. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing pretty good, Marvin. How are you?
As always, just trying to stay out of trouble, and took a look at your weather, and I may actually have to buy into the fact that it's cooler in Southwest Virginia than it is in Central Virginia, because you're not going to hit the century mark anytime soon.
No, man, I don't think we've hit the century mark since I've lived here. And yeah, I think, we might see 90 later this week when kind of the peak heat hits. But for the most part, we've been in a pretty consistent, 65, 70 to mid 80s temperature swing for the last little bit. So we're realistically pretty comfortable.
Yeah, and so, even though it's cooler where you are, really everything's about smallmouth right now. And, what are you seeing on the water?
Yeah, it definitely is all about smallmouth for me for the most part. We have had cooler water in the last couple of weeks, along with a lot of these summertime thunderstorms. It's kind of cooled some of the mountain trout streams off a little bit. I've been out there a couple of days messing around with that, and doing pretty well early in the day. But smallmouth is really my main focus all summer and early fall. And we have been kind of, all over the place the last couple of weeks. We've had storms rolling through just about every day. This week, it looks like we're going to get a little bit of break in that. But gosh, last week and the week before that, most days they were calling for anywhere from a third to an inch of rain. And this time of year, it's just kind of a gamble as to what you're going to get. There was a 3-day stretch a couple of weeks ago. I was fishing with the same folks from Northern Virginia, and they were calling for no less than 2/3 of an inch every day we fished, and we didn't get wet once, and it was sunny most of all 3 days. So, if anybody asks me this time of year, what the weather's going to do, my answer is I have no clue. We may get wet, we may not, but we're kind of rolling with the punches.
Yeah, there you go. And it's funny too. We were talking before we started recording that, summertime smallmouth fishing, everyone thinks about fishing basically that passive topwater approach with a cicada or a dragonfly or something like that. But that's not always the most productive way to catch fish.
Yeah. It's a weird spot for me, as a guide and somebody who, lives and breathes for topwater smallmouth fishing. But there is, in the summertime, oftentimes a disparity between, what the most effective technique for the day is based on the ambient foraging events that are going on and, what people want to do, what I want to do, which is always topwater fishing. But there's a very distinct time frame, usually in late summer, August through the end of September, where, you have lots of insects kicking around, a lot of insects starting to die off, particularly those dog day cicadas. Typically you have your, lowest water of the year. And topwater fishing is really, really good. And that's kind of the ambient condition that's going on. But throughout, June, July, there's a few other things going on that sometimes kind of complicate things a little bit. Like, for example, the last couple of weeks, there's been a real kind of preference, it seems, for crayfish flies. Because we have several different species of crayfish that are molting in the kind of mid to early summer time frame. And so there's some days where you're out and about and all things considered, topwater conditions are great. You've got low, clear water, bright sun, etc. And they're just not eating them like you think they should be. And then you can switch to a crayfish fly or something, kind of buggy or creaturey subsurface and start catching more fish. And, it's kind of, I put that up to my clients, what they want to do. because a lot of people have more fun throwing topwater flies than they do subsurface flies. And God knows it's kind of a pain in the butt to really methodically work the bottom with a crayfish fly when you could be throwing a topwater bug. But yeah, I mean, those things change throughout kind of that early summer time frame. And then, that said, some of those days where we've got real clear, real low water, you can do some sight fishing with topwater flies, because I feel like that's one of the most effective ways to sight fish a smallmouth bass. It's cruising in shallow water. But sometimes I think they're cruising those shallow rocky flats looking for other kinds of food, and just having the ability to feed a fish, to be able to put a fly right in front of them, helps put that fish in the boat. But if you're a little bit more blind casting, you'd be a lot better off fishing something that kind of takes advantage of the foraging event that's going on at that time.
Yeah, it's also, I guess, easier to cover water if you're fishing like a small stream or something, because at least you're getting the opportunity to show that fly to a lot more fish.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something I think we talked about in the last fishing report, or maybe one before that. It's not an abnormal condition in, during this time of year where we're having all these, pretty intense pop-up thunderstorms, to have, average to even low stream flows with some color in them, some dingy to dirty water that's no higher than you would normally be fishing. And in those kinds of situations in particular, streamer fishing definitely rules. Now, you can still catch fish on topwater flies, particularly ones that might make a little bit of noise or show off a little bit of flash, and that are a little less passive. But it's again, it's a question of what a fish will eat versus what they're looking for, and what's the most effective tool for the job.
Yeah, got it. And got a really interesting question for you too from Ed. Ed's been out a lot this year, smallmouth fishing, and he's seeing a lot more mammals. So he's seen a lot of otters and minks and things like that. And he was kind of curious, what we should take away from that from our fishing. So if we see an otter at a particular spot, does that mean we should motor through because he's just chowing down on the smallmouth? Or does it mean that maybe there's fish there and we should fish to them?
Right. I think that's an interesting question, and I don't have a quantified answer for that. But first of all, something I point out to a lot of people, because particularly when I worked for the game department, I used to get approached by people all the time saying, "Oh, I saw an otter up on such and such a creek, and they eat a lot of trout. So what are we going to do about it?" And the answer is nothing, because otters and minks and muskrats and all those critters are all native, and compared to smallmouth bass and wild rainbow trout and brown trout, they've kind of got the right to be where they are over the fish. So, but outside of that, I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you that I have several very productive pieces of water that I fish with regularity that have a ton of otters and minks on them, and there's still plenty of fish. But I think it also might be one of those things like the weather, the wind, or whatever that people potentially blame for other things. You're floating down the river and not catching as many fish as you think you should, and you see an otter and you think, oh, well, that's why. But I don't know if there's a way that we can really quantify that or prove that. And like I think we were talking about earlier, Marvin, there's definitely a couple different ways of looking at it. Kind of the glass half full or glass half empty outlook is, are the otters there because there's lots of fish there and they want to be there for the same reason we want to be there, or because they're there are all the fish dead because that's what they eat? So there's definitely two ways of looking at it, but I really don't know what the answer is, outside of the fact that if if you're in good habitat and you've caught fish there before and things look good and you see an otter, I wouldn't necessarily, discount that water because, they don't eat all the fish.
Yeah. What if you saw a really fat otter?
Really fat otter, you might consider coming back and harvesting its pelt later in the year and trying to sell it because they go for a pretty good buck some places.
Well, there you go. I thought maybe that would mean they were eating all the fish.
Maybe, but again, kind of like the guys on the Tennessee tailwaters talk about how the stripers eat all the trout. Well, I don't think they're eating that many 25-inch trout or 20-inch trout. So whether they're eating a bunch of 6 and 8-inch smallmouth or not, I would still fish through that water because there might be a big fish that'll make your day.
Yeah, well, there you go. And, folks, we love questions at the Articulate Fly. You can email them to us. You can DM us on social media. You can drop them in the comments to our social media posts, whatever's easiest for you. And if we use your question, I will send you some Articulate Fly swag. And we're going to draw for something cool from Matt at the end of the season. And, Matt, I know you've got a few days open because you've had a few cancellations. I saw your Instagram feed a little bit earlier today. You want to let folks know, I guess, one, what you have available, and two, how to find you.
Yeah, dude, we've had a ton of cancellations for a bunch of different reasons. But so, I guess the moral of that story is whether you think it's, too last minute or not, always reach out because, there's always days popping up last minute. But we got a couple of days. I think I have 2 days left in September. And now I think I have about 7 in August. So first half of August too. So those are, we need to get those filled. So if anybody wants to get out on the river during what is definitely kind of prime time topwater season, definitely give me a shout. And all that information's on my website, which is MattReillyFlyFishing.com. And, reach out however you feel best, and we'll get you hooked up.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, folks, you owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few and maybe watch a few otters. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Matt.
Thanks, Marvin.